The house was too quiet. Every clock tick seemed louder than it should, as if time itself had grown impatient. Roy Hayes sat at the kitchen table, his dinner half eaten, staring at the empty chair across from him. Ellen's chair. It had been 2 years since the cancer took her, but some nights, the air still held the weight of her perfume, lilac and laundry soap. He reached for the salt shaker, placed it where she always did, and caught himself with a bitter smile. Old habits were harder to kill than grief. The silence broke with a ringtone. His flip phone vibrated across the table, its tiny light reflecting in his glass of water. He hesitated, as though answering might change something fundamental, then pressed the green button. "Dad." A bright, rehearsed voice filled the room. Caitlin, his only child. The warmth of her tone struck him, like sunlight through a cracked window. He straightened in his chair. "Sweetheart, I was just having dinner." He didn't mention the meal was yesterday's meatloaf, reheated again. Her voice bubbled with casual concern. "Are you eating enough? I showed you how to order groceries on that app, remember?" "I'm fine. Plenty to eat." He lied smoothly. She couldn't see the thinness in his fridge. For a moment, it was almost like old times. Her voice, the sound of life outside these walls. He could picture her frown when she scolded him gently, the little crease between her brows, a mirror of her mother. Then a muffled rustle. Voices in the background. He thought she'd hung up, until another voice, sharper, cut through the static. "Jeremy. Her husband. It's getting dangerous, Kate." He forgot the stove again. "He'll burn the place down." "It's time?" Roy froze. His breath stuck like a nail in his throat. Caitlin's reply was clear now, stripped of warmth. "You're right. He can't live alone anymore. The market's hot. We could get close to $1 million for that place. Finally get the house in Boulder." A laugh. His daughter's laugh. Not light, not joyful. Calculating. The phone slipped in his grip, clattering against the table. For a long moment, all Roy could hear was the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Ellen's anniversary gift. Steady as a heartbeat. His gaze wandered to the photo on the mantel. Ellen in her garden. Sunlight caught in her hair. She had always warned him. Don't give so much that she forgets to be grateful. He clenched his jaw. They thought he was confused. They thought he was old, weak, a burden to be shuffled out of sight. But the house, every board, every nail, every corner, was his life's work. His hands had built it. His wife had filled it with warmth. His daughter had grown up inside it. And if they wanted to steal it from him, they were about to discover that the old man still had fight left. The clock ticked. Roy's fists curled slowly on the table. Fade to black. Morning light spilled across the living room like a trespasser. Roy stood at the window, watching the neighborhood stir awake. Joggers with earbuds. Children lugging backpacks. A couple loading groceries into the back of a new SUV. Life moved forward, brisk and shiny, while he lingered in a house that belonged to yesterday. The words he'd overheard kept gnawing at him. Burden. Nursing home. Sell the house. They repeated like the grandfather clock's tick. Steady, cruel, undeniable. He wandered through the rooms, each one carrying an echo. The kitchen where Ellen used to hum, while stirring soup. The bay window she had begged for, where she'd read on rainy afternoons. Upstairs, Caitlin's old bedroom still held the yellow paint she'd chosen as a teenager. Posters from her college years clung to the walls, curling at the edges. The faint scratch marks on the closet door, reminders of the puppy she'd once begged to keep. Every corner spoke of sacrifice, overtime shifts, missed vacations, weekends spent with hammer and nails instead of rest. He had built these walls with his own hands, believing they would protect his family for generations. Now his daughter, the very person who took her first steps on these floors, wanted to strip it all for cash. At the mantel, Ellen's photo seemed to look straight through him. She had been the compass, the one who balanced his giving nature with caution. He could almost hear her voice. "Promise me, you won't let anyone take advantage of you." He had promised, and failed. Roy's hands trembled as he opened an old drawer in the sideboard. Inside lay decades of neatly stacked papers, tuition receipts, Caitlin's wedding bills, loan documents he'd paid off in sweat. Each slip of paper was a story of sacrifice. Each one a quiet ledger of love. And each one now, proof of how quickly gratitude fades. The phone buzzed again. Caitlin's name on the screen. He let it ring until the sound faded into silence. He wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not with the new weight behind it. Not with the memory of her laugh, cold and sharp, slicing into his chest. Instead, he stepped outside to the porch. The garden Ellen had planted was stubbornly alive, tulips pushing through soil she had once tilled with her bare hands. He knelt, ran his fingers through the dirt, solid, rooted. Unlike Caitlin, the earth remembered who had cared for it. A thought began to form. Quiet at first, then sharper, steadier. He didn't have to be the helpless old man they imagined. He still had choices. He still had control. As dusk fell, he sat alone in Ellen's old recliner. The house dark except for the glow of a single lamp. His mind was no longer circling grief, it was calculating. Every tick of the clock marked not just time passing, but a step closer to a decision. By the time midnight arrived, the fear had drained from him. In its place was resolve. Roy Hayes would not be discarded. Not by his daughter, not by anyone. Fade out. The house creaked as if it shared his unrest. Roy sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, receipts and old photographs spread before him like evidence in a trial. Tuition bills, wedding invoices, mortgage slips, each piece a memory, each one stamped with sacrifice. He ran his thumb across a faded note Ellen had written in the margin of a grocery list. Don't forget milk. Love you. It was all supposed to mean something. But now it was just kindling for his daughter's ambition. The phone rang again, vibrating across the wood. Caitlin's number. He let it ring, then ring again. He imagined her voice rehearsed, polite, carefully balancing affection with calculation. He almost answered. Almost. Until Jeremy's words replayed in his mind. He's a burden. Roy snapped the flip phone shut. The sound was sharp. Final. He stood and moved through the house with new eyes. No longer did the rooms whisper memories. Now they exposed vulnerabilities. To Caitlin and Jeremy, this wasn't a home. It was a ledger entry. Square footage, market value, profit margin. Every board he'd nailed. Every wall he'd painted. Reduced to numbers. He stopped at the master bedroom. Ellen's jewelry box still sat on the dresser. The last place her hands had touched. He opened it, running his finger over her wedding ring, smooth from years of wear. In the reflection of the mirror above the dresser, he caught his own face. Older, thinner, but not broken. Not yet. Something shifted in him then, something hard and unyielding. They wanted him out. They wanted the house. Then maybe they should see just how much control the burden still had. The next morning, Roy dressed in the suit Ellen had chosen for their anniversary dinner years ago. The fabric felt stiff, but the act of wearing it sharpened him. He drove across town, the city sliding past his window like a film reel. The law office was small, brick, unpretentious. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. The attorney Fisher greeted him with a steady handshake. Mr. Hayes, what can I do for you? Roy sat straighter than he had in months. I want to know what it takes to sell a house fast. My house? No family signatures, just mine. The lawyer studied him, then nodded slowly. If the deed's in your name, sir, and it is, then the decision is entirely yours. A silence stretched. Roy inhaled, long and deep, like a diver before the plunge. Good, he said. His voice didn't tremble. Then let's do it. For a moment, Fisher looked surprised, but Roy's expression didn't waver. Papers slid across the desk, legal terms explained, options presented. Roy absorbed it all with the sharp focus of an engineer checking blueprints. By the time he walked back to his truck, contract drafts in his briefcase, something had lifted inside him. The grief was still there, the betrayal still raw, but for the first time since Ellen's death, he felt power in his own hands. He glanced at the photo of her he carried in his wallet. I'm not helpless, Ellen, he whispered. Not anymore. The truck engine roared to life. The turning point had come. Fade to black. Roy hadn't expected selling a house to feel like mourning twice. The realtor, a brisk man with sharp shoes and sharper smiles, walked through the room snapping photos on his tablet. These floors, he said, crouching to examine the oak. Perfect condition. Buyers will love them. Roy's jaw tightened. They're not floors, he thought. They're 20 years of sweat and splinters. They're Ellen reading by the fire. They're Caitlin taking her first steps. But he said nothing. He just nodded as the man calculated dollar signs over memories. When the agent left, silence returned heavier than before. Roy sat in Ellen's reading chair, staring at the bay window. Sunlight slanted across the carpet, the same way it had on Christmas mornings, when Caitlin tore open presents. He could almost hear her laughter. The kind that used to belong to a little girl who believed her father could fix anything. Now that same girl was planning to throw him away. The phone rang again. Caitlin. This time Roy answered. Dad. Finally. We've been trying to reach you. Her voice was syrupy, a practice concern. Jeremy and I have been talking. We think it's time you took a little vacation. There's this place. Beautiful, full of people your age, with staff on hand. A resort. Really, you'd love it. Roy gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. A resort with medical staff, he thought bitterly. A warehouse with flowers in the lobby. That's thoughtful, sweetheart, he said, keeping his tone steady. But I've got a surprise for you too, when you're back. Oh. She laughed lightly, almost relieved. What is it? You'll see, he replied. His reflection in the window looked nothing like the helpless man she imagined. When he hung up, the silence in the house was no longer lonely. It was alive, humming with anticipation. The sale moved fast, faster than he'd dared hope. Cash buyers, 10 days. Contracts signed in ink that felt heavier than steel. As he signed, he thought of Ellen. He imagined her hand on his shoulder, steadying him, telling him this was right. But the nights grew harder. Packing Ellen's jewelry box. Folding away Caitlin's childhood photos. Touching the walls one last time. Each item placed in a suitcase felt like tearing skin. He whispered to the empty air, I'm sorry, Ellen. But I have to do this. I won't let them erase me. By the 8th day, the house wasn't his anymore. The locks were changed. The furniture stood like abandoned monuments to a family that no longer existed. Roy walked through one final time, placing a folded note on the inside of the door. Words written with the precision of an engineer and the weight of a father's broken heart. Outside, twilight painted the garden in deep gold. Roy lingered on the porch, inhaling the scent of Ellen's tulips one last time. His chest ached, not with fear, but with finality. Tomorrow, Caitlin and Jeremy would return. Tomorrow, they would find out what it meant to underestimate a man who had built his life with his own hands. Fade to black. The sky was low and gray when the black SUV rolled into the driveway. Roy watched from his new apartment, the live camera feed glowing on his phone. He'd angled it perfectly, the porch, the lock, the envelope taped to the door. His heart thudded in his chest, not with fear anymore, but with something harder. Anticipation sharpened into steel. Caitlin stepped out first, heels clicking against the pavement. Her laughter carried across the yard, casual, expectant. Jeremy followed, juggling their suitcases, already pointing toward the door. They looked like homeowners returning from vacation, not thieves in waiting. Caitlin dug for her keys. The camera's microphone picked up the jingle, the sharp scrape of metal against brass. She twisted once. Twice. Her brow furrowed. She tried again, harder. Jeremy. The lock? Let me. He took the keys, tried himself. Nothing. His jaw tightened. He walked briskly to the back door. Another failure. Even the garage remote was dead. He returned, face pale. These aren't the same locks. On the feed, Roy saw Caitlin's smile falter, then collapse. She pounded the door once with her palm, then froze when her eyes landed on the envelope taped at eye level. Her hand trembled as she peeled it free. Inside the quiet apartment, Roy could almost feel the paper crinkle. She read aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you're holding this note, then you've discovered what I already knew. You wanted me gone. Out of sight, out of mind. A burden, a man to be warehoused, while you sold the home I built with your mother's hands and mine. You forgot who I am. You forgot what I've given. So I've sold the house myself. The money is mine. My future is mine. Yours, however, is not here. Your things are in storage. You have 30 days to claim them. After that, they are gone. I loved you, Caitlin. I gave you everything. And in return, you tried to take even my dignity. Never mistake my silence for weakness again. Dad, duh. Caitlin's hands shook. The letter slipped from her fingers. On the screen, Roy saw her knees bend, as though her body couldn't hold her weight. She pressed her face into her hands, the practiced warmth gone, only raw disbelief left. Jeremy's mask cracked, too. His voice was sharp, desperate. He outplayed us. The old man outplayed us. Where do we go, Jeremy? Where do we even go? Caitlin's voice was small, the voice of a child again, but no one was there to answer. Roy leaned back in his chair, breath leaving him like a long exhale. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was something quieter, heavier. Justice, maybe. Or just release. On the feed, his daughter stood on the porch of a house that was no longer hers, staring at a door she could never open again. Roy closed the app. The screen went black. For the first time in years, the silence around him felt like peace. Fade out. The city was quieter at night, softened under amber street lamps. From his small apartment balcony, Roy leaned against the railing, a glass of wine in his hand. The bottle had been waiting for years, dust gathering in Ellen's cabinet until tonight. He poured only one glass. That was the hardest part. Below, the world carried on. Cars humming down the avenue. A couple laughing as they passed. Someone walking a dog with a blinking red collar. Roy lifted the glass, staring at the way the streetlight fractured in the liquid. To you, Ellen, he whispered. His voice caught, but he steadied it. I kept my promise. I couldn't let them take me. Not even her. He drank slowly, letting the bitterness burn, letting it remind him he was still alive. Inside, the apartment was sparse but warm. Boxes still stacked in corners, a recliner positioned near the window. On the wall, the first photo he'd hung Ellen in her garden. Sunlight caught in her hair. Her smile filled the room more than any furniture could. He sat and let the silence surround him. Though it was not the same silence of the old house. That silence had been heavy with absence, suffocating with memory. This one was different. Empty, yes, but open, like a field waiting for footsteps. For the first time in years, the future was his alone. That thought was frightening. It was also liberating. The phone buzzed on the table. A new message from Caitlin. Just one line. Please call me. Roy stared at it for a long while. The glow of the screen lit his face, etching the deep lines time had carved there. He didn't feel anger anymore. Only distance. Distance measured not in miles but in choices, in betrayals that could not be undone. He set the phone face down. Some doors, once closed, should remain closed. Instead, he walked back to the balcony, the city stretching before him like an unwritten page. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain on concrete. He breathed deeply, the kind of breath that fills the chest and steadies the bones. In the quiet, he imagined Ellen beside him. Her hand slipping into his the way it always had. He spoke softly into the night, words carried upward. I'm not done yet. Not while I still have breath. A bus rumbled past, its windows glowing. Life moving, unstoppable. For once, he didn't feel left behind. He raised the empty glass to the sky, a silent toast. Not to victory, not to revenge, but to survival, to dignity, to the stubbornness of a heart that refused to be erased. When he turned back inside, the room was still small, still sparse. But it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a beginning. And for the first time since Ellen's passing, Roy Hayes closed his eyes with something close to peace. Fade to black.